My parents swore I'd inherit everything, yet when they died, their entire fortune went to my cousin. I grew up in a household where every word from my parents felt like a promise carved in stone, and from as early as I can remember, they always reminded me that one day everything they worked for would be mine. Our family dinners often turned into lectures about responsibility, about how I was expected to carry the family name with honor, about how the wealth they had accumulated was not just money, but a legacy. They told me stories of their struggles when they were young, how they started with nothing, and how every sacrifice they made was for me, their only son. I carried that weight proudly, believing that my life was mapped out, that I only needed patience to one day take the reins. It wasn't arrogance, it was trust, the kind of blind trust a child has in his parents' word. And so I lived my life under the assumption that my future was secure, that the family fortune would be the foundation of everything I would build. As the years passed, that promise became a constant thread in my life, woven into every decision I made. I chose not to chase risky ventures, I avoided unnecessary loans, and I planned my life carefully, thinking about the stability that would one day be mine. Whenever I doubted myself, my parents would repeat those same words. One day, everything here will belong to you. They said it when I graduated high school, when I finished college, even when I got my first job. It became almost like a mantra, a reassurance that no matter what storms I faced, there was a safe harbor waiting for me. I looked at our house, at the land, at the business they had built, and I thought, all of this is already mine, it just hasn't been signed over yet. And in that certainty, I built my identity, not realizing how fragile that foundation truly was. Then came my cousin, the one who had always hovered at the edges of our family gatherings like a shadow. He was charming, the kind of man who could smile his way out of any situation, but he was also reckless. I never envied him, because while I was taught discipline, he lived chasing whims. Yet strangely, my parents always welcomed him with warmth, even when he failed, even when he disappointed. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just pity, a way of helping him since his own parents weren't as well off. But over time, I noticed subtle changes. My father laughing more at his jokes than mine, my mother praising his smallest achievements while overlooking my hardest efforts. It was small things, the kind you brush off until you realize they're not small at all. Looking back, the signs were always there, but I was too blind with certainty to see them. I remember the night it all started to shift, though at the time I didn't know it was the beginning of the end. My parents hosted a family dinner, one of those big gatherings where everyone sat around the table, and for some reason, my cousin was seated right beside my father. They spoke as if they were partners, exchanging glances, whispering plans, laughing about things I wasn't included in. I felt a sting of jealousy, but I told myself it didn't matter. After all, I was still the heir, wasn't I? Later that evening, I overheard my parents in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones about giving him a chance and setting things in order. The words stuck with me, but I refused to believe they meant anything serious. I didn't confront them. I didn't question it because I trusted them too much to imagine they could betray me. Trust is a dangerous thing when it's blind. It wasn't until after their passing that the truth revealed itself with brutal clarity. Sitting in the lawyer's office, I expected grief to be softened by reassurance, the promise that though they were gone, their words still lived on through their will. But as the papers were read aloud, my world collapsed. Every asset, every property, every last cent transferred to my cousin's name. Nothing for me, not even a token gesture, not even acknowledgement of the years I spent believing in their promise. The lawyer's voice echoed like a death sentence, and I sat there frozen, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. My parents, the ones who had sworn on their very lives that I was their legacy, had left me with nothing. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the very people you trusted most. And in that moment, I realized my entire life had been built on a lie. The lawyer's words kept echoing in my head long after the ink dried on the documents, but it wasn't until I saw my cousin's smug smile that the weight of it all crashed down on me. He didn't even bother hiding his satisfaction. He looked at me with the kind of victorious grin that stripped away any illusion of innocence. My parents had chosen him. My parents, who raised me, who shaped me, who promised me every single day that I was their legacy. They had turned their backs on me in the most final way possible. Rage rose in me like fire, scorching my chest, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream at the walls, to tear the will into pieces, to undo reality itself, but there was no undoing, no waking from this nightmare. Every possession I once thought of as mine, every corner of the house where I grew up, every dollar in the bank, it was all his, and I was left with nothing but questions, questions that no one alive could answer anymore. My parents were gone, their voices silenced forever, and all that remained was the bitter taste of betrayal. I wanted to believe there had been a mistake, that some clause had been overlooked, but the signatures on those papers were theirs. They had made a choice, and that choice was not me. I confronted my cousin outside the lawyer's office, my hands trembling, my voice breaking between anger and disbelief. "You knew I spat at him, my chest heaving. He didn't deny it. He just shrugged, as if the fortune of a lifetime was nothing more than a casual gift, something he had always known would come his way. That arrogance shattered something inside me. I demanded to know what he had done, what lies he had fed them, what games he had played to turn them against me. He chuckled, and said maybe my parents had finally seen him for who he truly was, and me for who I truly was. The audacity of those words made my blood boil. Who was I then? The son who had obeyed, who had sacrificed, who had followed every path they laid out for me, or the fool who believed in promises never meant to be kept? My cousin walked away that day, carrying not only their fortune, but also the last fragments of my trust in family. I stood in the parking lot, fists clenched, bodies shaking, staring at a future that had just been ripped away from me. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly powerless. The nights that followed were sleepless, haunted by memories that twisted into nightmares. I replayed every moment with my parents, every smile, every reassuring word, every touch on the shoulder where they told me they were proud. It all felt poisoned now, as though every hug had been a lie, every lesson a cruel joke preparing me for an inheritance that would never come. I began questioning my entire childhood. Had I been blind all along? Were they grooming me for a role I was never meant to play? Or did something change, something I never saw coming? The silence of the grave offered no answers, only the torment of my own mind. I felt like a ghost wandering through my own life, stripped of identity, stripped of purpose. Because who was I without their promise? Who was I if even my parents didn't believe in me? Rage gave way to despair, and despair to an emptiness so vast that even my own reflection in the mirror seemed like a stranger's face staring back. I avoided the family gatherings after that, because every face, every relative carried questions in their eyes that I couldn't bear to answer. Some pitied me, some whispered behind my back, and a few dared to ask how it felt to lose everything. Lose everything. The words themselves felt wrong. How could I lose what was never truly mine? Yet in my heart, I knew I had lost far more than wealth. I had lost faith. I had lost the belief that family meant loyalty, that parents meant unconditional love. And in its place, a new darkness grew inside me, one that whispered of vengeance, not necessarily to reclaim the money. I knew that door was closed forever, but to reclaim the dignity that had been stripped from me. I wanted my cousin to pay, not in dollars, but in fear, in regret, in sleepless nights that mirrored my own. I wanted him to feel the emptiness he had so casually left me with, and that desire consumed me more than any hunger for fortune ever had. There came a night when I drove past the old family house, the house where I had grown up, where I had laughed as a child, where my parents once told me bedtime stories about honor and sacrifice. Now it stood lit from within, my cousin's silhouette moving across the windows like a thief parading his prize. I parked across the street, staring for hours, unable to move, unable to breathe, drowning in the weight of what I had lost. The walls seemed to whisper, the windows seemed to mock me, and the house itself felt like a stranger. Tears burned my eyes, but behind the tears was a fire that refused to die. In that moment, I swore to myself that this betrayal would not define me, not as their son, not as his cousin, but as a man who had been left with nothing and would rise from it. I clenched the steering wheel until my hands ached, feeling the storm inside me solidify into something sharper, something more dangerous. That night, in the shadows outside what should have been my home, I made a vow. If fate had stripped me of my inheritance, then I would carve my own legacy from the ashes. The days turned into weeks, and the bitterness that once threatened to consume me slowly began to transform into something else. At first I drowned in the anger, replaying every scene of betrayal in my head, convinced that the only way forward was to let hatred guide me. But as the silence of my empty apartment pressed against me, I started to realize that carrying their betrayal inside me was like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. My parents had chosen my cousin, whether manipulated or willingly, I would never truly know. But the more I thought about it, the more I understood that the fortune they denied me was not the foundation of who I was. It was a crutch, a safety net I had leaned on all my life, and perhaps that was the reason they had taken it away. Maybe they saw me as someone who had waited too long for their promise to define his future. Maybe they wanted to test whether I could stand without it. Or maybe, and most painfully, maybe they simply didn't believe in me anymore. That thought cut deeper than any financial loss, but it also lit a spark inside me, the realization that I could no longer live waiting for validation from ghosts. I began to change my routines, forcing myself into long nights of reflection and long days of work. I poured myself into projects I had abandoned, ideas I had shelved because I always assumed I didn't need to rush, because inheritance would eventually take care of everything. Now, With nothing left, I discovered a strange kind of freedom. There was no safety net, no backup plan, no guaranteed fortune. Every step I took was mine alone, every success and every failure carved into my own flesh. At first, the fear was overwhelming. My hands shook when I signed contracts. My voice wavered when I spoke in meetings. My heart raced when I risked money I could not afford to lose. But slowly, that fear transformed into strength. Every small victory tasted sweeter than the wealth I had once assumed would be handed to me. Every late night spent building something of my own became a silent rebellion against the betrayal. I was no longer the boy waiting for promises to be fulfilled. I was the man proving that I could create my own destiny without them. Of course, the ghost of my cousin lingered in every step I took. I would hear his name in social circles, whispered with admiration because of the wealth he had inherited, not earned. People spoke of him as though fortune defined character, as though money was proof of greatness. And though I clenched my teeth at every mention, I realized something powerful. He might have inherited my parents' wealth, but I had inherited their resilience, the discipline they instilled in me, the lessons they repeated through my childhood. Those things couldn't be stolen or transferred through a will. They were mine, etched into my bones, and no paper in a lawyer's office could take them away. The more I embraced this truth, the more I felt the chains of anger loosen. My cousin could live in the house I once called home. He could drive the cars and spend the money, but he would never have what I was beginning to build: purpose. His fortune was given, mine was earned, and that difference meant everything. The path wasn't easy, it was brutal. There were nights I questioned myself, nights I wondered if I was only deluding myself, if maybe I really had been the fool my cousin claimed I was. But every time doubt tried to crush me, I forced myself to remember that standing still meant dying slowly. My parents had taken away the inheritance, but in doing so, they had given me something else, a reason to fight. I realized that wealth inherited is fragile, but wealth created is unshakable. Every failure became a lesson, every setback became fuel. I started seeing the world not as a place that had betrayed me, but as a place daring me to rise. And so I rose, not perfectly, not easily, but defiantly. The boy who once waited for his parents' approval was gone. In his place stood a man forged by disappointment, sharpened by betrayal, and strengthened by fire. And in time, as years passed and my own empire began to take shape, I found myself driving past the old family house once again. My cousin still lived there, his life still orbiting around the fortune he had been gifted, his days spent trying to uphold a legacy that was never truly his to carry. I parked my car at the same spot where I once vowed revenge, but this time I felt no fire, no hatred. Instead, I felt something far greater: freedom. I no longer wanted what was his, because I had built something far more powerful, my own legacy, untouchable, undeniable, entirely mine. The house, the money, the betrayal, it no longer defined me. What defined me was survival, transformation, and the unbreakable truth that I had risen from nothing, not because of my parents, not because of their promises, but in spite of them. And that realization was worth more than any inheritance could ever be. I often wonder what it means to lose everything and yet find yourself in the ruins. For a long time I believed my parents' betrayal had destroyed me, that by leaving me with nothing they had erased the man I was supposed to become. But with every passing day, I realized that what they took from me was not my future. It was only the illusion of certainty. In the hollow spaces they left behind, I discovered a truth stronger than wealth. I was never meant to inherit a fortune. I was meant to create one. The nights I spent staring into the void, asking why, turned into nights spent building, learning, and pushing myself beyond limits I never knew existed. And though the sting of betrayal never fully disappears, it has become fuel. I carry it like a scar across my soul, not as a wound that weakens me, but as a mark of survival, proof that I endured the fire and rose from it. When I look back now, I see not the boy who waited for promises, but the man who fought to become more than anyone expected. That is the legacy I chose to claim, and no one, not even my cousin, can take that from me. The most painful realization was understanding that my parents' love had been conditional, tied to their perception of worth, a perception I never quite fit. For years I twisted myself to meet their expectations, believing that obedience and sacrifice would be enough to earn their approval. But their final decision taught me something cruel, yet liberating. No matter how hard we try, we cannot control how others see us, not even those who gave us life. That truth nearly broke me, but in breaking, it set me free. I stopped trying to live for them, or for anyone else, and began to live for myself. That choice was terrifying, because it meant standing without their guidance, without their safety net. But it also meant standing with my own strength, fragile at first, but growing stronger, with each step. My cousin may wear the mask of success, draped in the wealth they handed him, but deep down I know he will always remain dependent on what was given. I, on the other hand, have become something he will never understand. A man who faced the abyss and built his own way out of it, brick by brick, with nothing but his will to survive. There are nights when the memory still burns, when I hear my father's voice promising me the world, when I see my mother's eyes filled with pride that now feels hollow. Those echoes haunt me, but I no longer run from them. Instead, I embrace them as reminders of who I was and who I can never be again. Betrayal may have written the ending of one chapter, but I hold the pen to every chapter that follows. And in writing those chapters, I discovered that the greatest inheritance we can receive is not wealth, not land, not possessions. It is the strength to rise when the world tries to bury us. That is the truth I carry forward, the truth I want you to feel as you hear my story. Because maybe you too have been betrayed, maybe you too have been left with nothing but ashes and silence. And if you have, know this, those ashes are not the end. They are the soil in which you can plant something new, something greater. Do not wait for promises. Do not wait for someone else to hand you your worth. Take it, build it, claim it, and make it your own. When I speak these words aloud, I know they carry the weight of my entire journey, but I also know they might echo in the hearts of those listening. Betrayal is not unique to me. It is the shadow that many carry in silence, the scar that families, lovers, and friends can leave behind. And if you have ever felt that sting, if you have ever been cast aside, then you know the emptiness it leaves. But emptiness is not the end. It is a beginning disguised in pain. I once thought I'd been robbed of everything, but in truth, I had only been stripped of illusions. What remained was raw, unshaped, terrifying, but it was also pure. It was mine. That purity became the foundation of my rebirth. And though the world might look at me and see a man who lost his inheritance, I look at myself and see a man who gained his freedom. If you carry betrayal in your chest, do not let it chain you. Let it forge you. Let it burn away who you were and reveal who you were meant to become. That is the gift hidden inside the pain, a gift no one can ever take from you. As I rebuilt my life, I began to understand that strength is not silent, and healing is not meant to be hidden. For too long, I kept my story locked inside me, ashamed of what my parents had done, ashamed of being the son left behind. But telling this story is part of my healing, because when wounds are shared, they become bridges instead of cages. Each word I speak tears away a little more of the shame, replacing it with truth, with resilience, with light. And maybe, just maybe, someone listening will see themselves in my story. Maybe they will realize they are not alone in their pain. Maybe they will find the courage to rise, just as I did. That is why I share every detail, not for pity, not for sympathy, but for connection. Because betrayal isolates us, makes us believe we are abandoned in darkness. But the truth is, there are many of us here, many carrying the same scars, many rising from the same ashes. And together, we can turn pain into power. That is why this story cannot simply end with me. It is not enough that I survived, not enough that I built my own legacy. What matters now is what you do with this story. Will you let it slip past, just another tale of loss and redemption? Or will you let it light a fire inside you, the way pain lit one inside me? Because you hold the power to decide whether betrayal defines you or whether you rise from it stronger than before. And if my story has touched even the smallest part of you, then I ask you, don't let it end here. Carry it with you. Reflect on it. And if it spoke to you, let me know. Share your story, your scars, your strength, because every voice matters. Together we create a chorus of survival, of resilience, of triumph. So if you are listening now, don't just remain silent in the shadows. Leave a comment. Share your truth. Let others know they are not alone. Because silence keeps us chained, but words can set us free. There was a time when I believed my parents' will had sealed my fate forever, that by leaving me with nothing they had erased my future. But I stand here now as living proof that no betrayal, no loss, no injustice can destroy the fire inside a man who refuses to surrender. I built from ashes. I rose from silence. I carved a life that no inheritance could ever compare to. And that is why I share this story with you. Not because I am seeking pity, but because I know how it feels to be broken, to feel abandoned, to stand at the edge of everything and wonder if you can go on. If you have ever stood at that edge, then you know the darkness that whispers lies telling you that you are not enough. But hear my voice now. You are enough. You are stronger than the betrayal, stronger than the silence, stronger than the chains that try to hold you down. If I could rise, so can you. And together our scars can become our greatest weapons, reminders that we are unbreakable. I want you to understand something deeply. This is not just my story. It is a mirror for anyone who has ever been left behind. It is a reminder that promises can be broken, but people people can be rebuilt. It is a call to every soul who feels forgotten, who feels abandoned, who feels like their worth has been denied. Do not wait for someone else to hand you a crown. You already have one, forged in fire, waiting for you to claim it. That is what I learned when I was stripped of everything. Worth is not inherited, it is created. And if you believe in that, if these words resonate with your heart, then let them be more than just words. Let them be a beginning, because stories only live if they are shared, and pain only heals if it is spoken. So share yours, tell it, write it, speak it, let the world hear it. And if you feel this story has touched your soul, let me know. Leave a comment, because your story deserves to be heard too. And if you are here with me still, if you have listened all the way through this journey of betrayal, pain, and rebirth, then I want to ask you for something simple but powerful. This story, like many others, lives because it is told, and it grows because people like you choose to carry it forward. If you felt this story, if it shook something inside you, then I ask you, support it. Subscribe to this channel so that you never miss another story like this one. Hit the like button, because every act of support tells the world that stories of survival matter, that voices born from pain deserve to be heard. And leave a comment, not just for me, but for yourself, for others who might be scrolling through, searching for hope. Your words might be the lifeline someone else needs. You never know who you could help simply by speaking your truth. So this is my closing thought. My parents' fortune, my cousin's inheritance, the betrayal that once defined me, it all became irrelevant the moment I chose to rise. What defines me now is not what was taken, but what I built in its place. And what will define you is not the pain you carry, but the strength you choose to unleash because of it. Betrayal may write one chapter, but it cannot write the ending. Only you can do that. So if my story has given you even the smallest spark, hold on to it, let it grow. And if you are ready to keep walking this path with me, to hear more stories, to share your own, then take that step now. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your voice in the comments below. Because together we are not just telling stories, we are creating a community of survivors, a family forged not by inheritance, but by resilience. And that, my friend, is worth more than any fortune in the world.